Political ecology. The classical sovereign, quote, the classical sovereign nation state is, itself becoming irrelevant and impotent as the world rapidly coalesces into supranational, super-regional trading blocs whose main purpose and passion is neither to foster direct democracy input nor to address the festering and even worsening problems of environmental degradation. End quote. David Amos Curtis. Introduction. Today, ecology is emerging as a major concern and as an answer to the contemporary growth-based politico-economic model that is responsible for the creation of tangible environmental crisis and rapidly unfolding climate change. From as early as the beginning of the 19th century, a concern for the environment arose within Western societies, such as the Romanticists, sparked by the pollution caused by the Industrial Revolution. Nowadays, it is being expressed in theories like degrowth and social ecology, as well as in the form of popular struggles against consumerist culture and capitalist extractivist projects, harmful to the environment, human health, and local autarky. Ecology played a major role in the thought of Cornelius Castoriadis as well. He, however, viewed it in stark contrast from most of the environmentalists of his time and of today as well. Unlike the widespread understanding of nature as a commodity as something separated from society, Castoriadis viewed it in direct link with social life, relationships, and values, thus incorporating it in his political project. Criticism of contemporary environmental organizations. While Castoriadis saw in ecology a revolutionary potential, he most certainly did not see such in most major environmental organizations of his time. Instead, he noticed that they tend to deal exclusively with matters that concern strictly the natural environment, highly neglecting political and social issues. Green parties and the environmentalist NGOs thus participate to a large degree in the capitalist imaginary that views nature as a separated commodity that should be mastered by humanity. Because of this, for significant part of the green movement, the ongoing ecological crisis does not have a political side, and neither is being influenced by specific social structures. This shit's got mad typos. As a result, the solutions they offer do not overcome the dominant political framework, invoking instead technological or other fixes. The dominant perception among mainstream environmentalist circles is that the preservation of the, quote, great outdoors can be trusted to the market. Carbon emissions and pollution are being viewed as rights that can be sold at market-driven prices, I should say. In this way, the self-regulating capitalist fallacy is being reproduced among the ranks of the ecological movement. Terms such as green capitalism and sustainable development become central political proposals. Because of their non-critical acceptance of the contemporary system, these tendencies tend to approach the various facets of the environmental degradation as disconnected and necessary to be dealt with one piece at a time, often by scientific means, instead of as one holistic ecological crisis with systemic root causes that should be dealt with politically. As a result, their activity often leads to the co-optation of popular movements for the protection of nature by the systemic discourse. Groups and organizations from these tendencies often tend to call on people to symbolically reduce their impact on nature, like calling for international days of closed lights or less water consumption rather than pointing at multinationals and governments whose activities have environmentally catastrophic effects. In this way, they cloak the systemic features that cause most of the pollution and instead inflict social feelings of common human fault. What is often viewed as alternative to the foregoing, quote, green mindset are different eco-socialist and eco-Marxist trends. They are most often anchored into the metaphysics of the state and invoke the need of strong left parties in power to regulate human relations with nature. As can be imagined, the electoral seizure of political power is at the core of these tendencies. Despite the questionable effectiveness of this approach, these tendencies remain entrapped into highly economistic theoretical frameworks which regard production as the engine of social change. Finally, there are segments of the broader environmental movement which attempt to break with statism and capitalism. However, there is much to be criticized about the contemporary individualistic imaginary of some of these tendencies and of their devotion to spiritualistic personal change and lifestyle. Deep ecologists, New Age enthusiasts, and primitivists tend to blame environmental destruction on human civilization in general and advocate retreat to romanticized notions of the, quote, natural, rather than trace it to specific political and economic systems. Despite his criticism of the inability of the leading environmental organizations to overcome the imaginary of capitalism and political representation, Castoriadis recognized in the ecological movement a certain evolution in the field on which challenges, contestations, revolts, and revolutions are taking place. According to Castoriadis, this evolution takes part in two dimensions. In the installation of schemes of authority on the one hand, and in the installation of schemes of needs on the other. The former is exemplified by the workers' movement, while the latter by the ecological. Unlike class-centered analyses, Castoriadis saw in the workers' movement from the 19th century not simply an attempt at reshaping the economic sphere, but a direct democratic challenge to domination and authority on a holistic socio-political level. In his own words, quote, what the workers' movement attacked above all was the dimension of authority, that is to say, domination, which is its, quote, objective side. Even on this point, it left in the shadows as was almost inevitable at the time, some completely decisive aspects of the problem of authority and domination, therefore also political problems concerning the reconstruction of an autonomous society. Some of these aspects were put into question later on, and especially more recently by the women's movement and the youth movement, both of which attacked the schemata, the figures and the relations of authority as these existed in other spheres of social life, end quote. According to Castoriadis, the ecological movement that followed contributed with another dimension to the struggle against capitalist modernity. It put into question the very structure and nature of human needs, lifestyle, etc. Ecology constitutes a capital breakthrough in comparison with what can be seen as the unilateral character of previous movements. It challenged the entire relationship between humanity and the environment, raising again the eternal question of what is the human place in this world. The political essence of ecology. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Castoriadis disagrees with the idea that ecology is but another scientific branch and suggests instead that it is essentially political. He conceives it as humanity's relationship with nature and the corresponding limitations between the two. From this, Castoriadis concludes that ecology cannot be scientific, since science is not about setting regulations or limits before its goals, but discovering ways of achieving them. If scientific resources are mobilized to discover ways to destroy the planet, they will ultimately do so not because they are, quote, evil, end quote, or bad-hearted, but because this is what they are supposed to do. This does not mean that Castoriadis was scientophobic. On the contrary, Castoriadis insisted on the importance of mobilizing the resources of scientific research to explore the impact our activities have on the environment. But he knew that science alone is not enough to protect nature. It needs politics. Only through political deliberation one can determine what should and shouldn't be done, what is, quote, wrong or, quote, right, to what extent we can alter the planetary conditions. This logic of his counters the contemporary technoscience, the belief that technology and science alone can grant humanity mastery over everything. Today, this widespread technocratic concept has become the practical equivalent of religion. Technoscience has managed to reinforce the dominant ideological mystification in a time in which authority has become ostensibly desacralized. If in the past the power of the ruling elites was explained through its divine God-given origin, today it rests on the scientific knowledge that they claim to possess and allows them to constitute their destructive activities. Furthermore, unlike others, Castoriadis argues that technology today cannot be viewed as neutral since it has been developed and shaped by the dominant capitalist system, and thus it has been embedded with its core values of domination and subordination. Like religious sacralized regimes of the past, contemporary technocracies claim to know what the people actually, quote, need, end quote. They can calculate it through the means of science and deliver it through economic growth and extraction. But what they actually do is to express the needs embedded in one specific imaginary. In reality, we can say that there are no predetermined natural human needs. Every society creates its needs and the means for their satisfaction. For one truly religious person, the ultimate need is to make a pilgrimage to a holy, according to his faith, place, spending all his savings if required. For the anthropological type of capitalism, the need to constantly replace his belongings and gadgets with newer ones that are slightly different and supposedly improved seems as unquestionable and as natural as their very existence. Thus, quote, need is a social construct that can be altered. If this paradigm today manages to function, it is so because it successfully manages to provide the means for satisfaction of the needs it fabricates. And the debate between the two opposing fractions for the seats of power, the right and the left, is centered on this matter. The right-wingers advocate market deregulation as engine of growth, while the leftist forces often tend to blame the current close ties between multinationals and governments for the lessened buying power of local populations and promise, if elected, to fix that, and both sides insist on the scientific nature of their claims. In this sense, the current paradigm is less threatened by traditional ideological criticism rather than the danger of running out of oil, for example. What Castoriadis sees as problematic in the way modern societies conceive of the ongoing environmental crisis is the absence of prudence. The governing technocratic imaginary that continues its reign many years after the death of the philosopher prevents our societies to take certain precautions when engaging with the natural world. If scientific research cannot determine with certainty whether specific acts or procedure will irreversibly harm the environment, but there are doubts of such potentials, then precautionary measures, limitations should be determined through direct democratic means by all concerned, which by its essence is political process. Thus, ecology as presented above is incompatible with the current representative oligarchic political system that hinders any effort at genuine democratic deliberation. It requires the radical alteration of society's institutions so as to encourage humanity to act as steward, not master of the planet and its resources. In this sense, ecology must be conceived as part of a wider revolutionary project based on direct democracy, which directly challenges the contemporary institutional order. Castoriadis suggests that, quote, profound changes must take place in the psychosocial organization of Western man, in his attitude toward life, in short, in his imaginary. The idea that the sole goal of life is to produce and to consume more, an idea that is both absurd and degrading, must be abandoned. The capitalist imaginary of pseudo-rational, pseudo-mastery of unlimited expansion must be abandoned. That is something only men and women can do. A single individual or one organization can at best only prepare, criticize, and sketch out possible orientations, end quote. Ecology is not ideology. When viewed through such political prism, Castoriadis warns us ecology is not to be made into an ideology in the traditional sense of the term. Just as contemporary technoscience has become sacralized, so too ecological thinking can be integrated into a new religious cult or neo-fascist ideological project. Just as human health was turned by Nazi ideology into a dogma that led to the extermination of thousands of people with disabilities, so could a society faced with environmental catastrophe give birth to an authoritarian regime that will impose draconian restrictions with the sole target of preserving nature. What Castoriadis proposes is to integrate ecology into a broader political project that goes beyond narrow concerns for nature. Such politics will not be based on romantic mystic notions of the love of Mother Gaia, or the superiority of the, quote, virgin, end quote, nature over technology and science. Instead, it will take into account the balance between humanity and the planet without glorifying the one and diminishing the other, thus avoiding the danger of creating dogmas. Such ecological politics will be based on the recognition that our societies depend on certain fragile planetary conditions, and if they want to continue our existence as a species, we'll have to find a comfortable place within those fragile planetary conditions, without, however, abandoning technology and science per se. Because of our dependence on nature, ecology cannot be separated from direct democracy. If society is to intervene with such delicate matter, on which depends the future of each one of its members, then all of the social collectivity should have a say before one such intervention is undertaken. The specific technical way in which such a decision will be taken is of little importance here. Important is the principle. If it is to saw off the branch we are currently sitting on without another one in sight, let's at least ask everybody else that will share the fall. Self-limitation and ecology. The concept of limitation is of key importance when discussing Castoriadis' understanding of political ecology. Above all, it recognizes that the current environmental crisis is man-made. As Castoriadis suggests, today the greatest danger for humanity is humanity itself. No natural catastrophe equals the man-made catastrophes, which is more evident than ever with the stubborn way our societies continue to follow the paradigm of unlimited economic growth, insisting on a lifestyle that simply cannot be sustained by the infinite world we live in. A lifestyle that is sickening our bodies, our minds, and the fragile planetary conditions that make our existence possible. Self-limitation in the context of ecology is that there is no one that will protect us from ourselves. Our political leaders are proving unable to solve the ongoing environmental degradation, despite the numerous treaties signed between ruling elites and representatives of the big business. The ecological crisis seems to be deepening, and neither is the individual lifestyleish tackling of the environmental challenge any more productive. Shorter showers, closed lights in empty rooms, and eco-friendly products seem to only help for our self-esteem, boosting our egos and making us feel that we did our part without actually changing something of real importance. Self-limitation comes to remind us of our individual and social responsibility before ourselves, our fellow human beings, and the rest of the natural world that surrounds us. It stands for collectively forged laws, which were made by all with the conscious understanding that our society, as well as all of us individually, cannot do just anything. We ought to self-limit ourselves. According to Castoriadis, autonomy, or true freedom, is the self-limitation necessary not only in the rules of intrasocial conduct, but also in the rules we adopt in our conduct toward the environment. Conclusion. The future seems uncertain, especially regarding the ongoing environmental degradation that, if unattended, may develop into an existential crisis. It is difficult for one to remain optimistic with all the negative predictions and researches coming from the scientific community. Some claim that what we need is new technological innovations at the cost of greater economic growth. But as Castoriadis has demonstrated, this alone cannot prevent one ecological catastrophe. What one such existential crisis requires above all is the creative human power to draw new direction, a drastic paradigm change to navigate humanity towards a completely new direction, based on collective stewardship and not domination. What this creative power can bring in the future is, above all, a political matter. As Castoriadis reminds us, man, qua creative power, is man when he builds the Parthenon or the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, as well as when he sets up Auschwitz or the Gulag. It is political participation, or the absence of it, that shapes the values and principles of new emerging social forms. Thus, it is up to all of us, individually and collectively, to create and cultivate one paradigm shift that will navigate us towards a sustainable democratic future.